E, F, G, E cancels out. So I've got A plus B plus C minus F minus G. So before I had A, B, C. Now I have A, B, C minus F minus G. So deadweight loss is minus F minus G. Right? Big old deadweight loss, no matter which price you charge. But again, the way you draw your pizza slices and the way you figure it out really changes the way the burden of this policy is apportioned. Right? Here, producers take a big hit in terms of producer surplus. In the other scenario, consumers take a big hit in terms of consumer surplus loss. So it really depends on where you set the price here. I think I've answered your question more than I wanted to. They do owe you copy. Who was the second one? Here. Bias? Or, wow. Did somebody hack into my computer? You're asking good questions. Okay, I'm going to do that in words. Bias versus neutral technical change. Let's say there's a technical innovation, right? If before you were using 50-50 labor to capital, right, half-half, and after that you've put in place the technical innovation, you're still using a 50-50 ratio of capital to labor. That's neutral technical change, right? So the share pre and post technological innovation of labor to capital, that ratio, if it stays the same, the technical change was neutral. If, however, you have a technical change that makes it possible for you to fire everyone and replace them with robots, right? So before you had a 50-50 labor to capital ratio, now you have a 0-to-1 or 100% capital ratio. That technical change was biased, right? It was biased towards capital because your ratio of labor to capital has now changed, right? So it's simply if technology comes in, if you're using the same ratio as inputs, it's neutral. If that ratio changes, it's biased. Most of the technical change we see, I would argue, is biased, right? And there's good reason for that. Did I answer your question? Can I give examples? Okay, if I have before, let's say, one bank teller with one machine, one person with one machine, and I have replaced that person and that machine with just one machine, right? I've replaced a 50-50 ratio to a 100% with a 100% machine ratio. So that's biased, right? If I have technical change where before, t-shirt printing press, for example, you have some sort of innovation where one person before with one machine could print 100 t-shirts in an hour. Now one person with one machine can print 200 things in an hour. Your ratio of machine to capital has stayed, machine to labor has stayed constant. You're producing more, but the ratio has stayed the same, right? So it's all about what your labor share is. Has it changed after the technical innovation? Most of the technical innovations we've seen in most sectors across the U.S. economy have been biased towards capital, right? So a lot of biased technical change during the Industrial Revolution, even in agriculture. Were you for? Yep.
Do those ratio changes have to do with optimal, or is it across the board at any level of production?
So this is a good question. The way we usually look at it is there's a technical innovation. What do we observe people choose after the technical innovation? This becomes pretty tricky because you may have general equilibrium effects where all of a sudden input prices change and that sort of shifts things around. But the way I just want you to think about it, let input prices stay the same. There's some technical innovation and you shift towards one or the other factor more, that's biased technical change. But that whole literature is a field to itself. It's very, very complicated and it involves property rights and regulation and all kinds of interesting things. And people get Nobel Prizes for that. Correct. That's all it says. Person number 4. Yes. Why it is horizontally flat? Yeah, got it. All right. So when would supply be flat? So we're talking long run. That's correct. So let's think about this for a second. So long run supply is flat. Sorry, I can't talk and operate machinery at the same time. Okay. So we're in the long run. All right. And what the gentleman's asking here is the following picture. So this is the firm here, and this is the this is so sloppy, and this is the market. So this is big Q, price, little q. Right? If I have some firm has an average variable cost curve like this and a marginal cost curve like this, how do I go from this to a flat long-run supply curve? Right? There's 3 dimensions that matter. What you need is identical firms. You need free entry and exit. And you need constant costs. So think of the taxi cab example. If you have identical firms, a smelly Crown Vic with an annoying TV system that won't turn off, all right? So identical firms, lots of them. You can start up taxi cab services whenever you want, right? Free entry and exit. You can stop working anytime you want. And constant costs, meaning if there are more cabs on the road, it doesn't affect the wages of cab drivers or the price of gasoline or the price of smelly Crown Vics, all right? So if you have free entry and exit, identical firms, and constant costs, you get a nice flat long-run supply curve at minimum average variable cost. Right? So this is what the long-run supply curve looks like. How does it get upward sloping? It gets upward sloping if you limit the number of firms, if you have capacity-constrained firms with different costs, or if you have an increasing cost market, right? Where if as industry output goes up, input prices rise, simply because that particular industry uses a significant share of a scarce input. Yes? So in the long run, right? If you lose money, you exit the market. That's right. So why is that? So in the long run, remember, average variable and average total costs are the same. Right? In the long run, there's no fixed costs. So as they are, it's a good question. This average variable and average fixed costs are the same thing in the long run. So they get zero profit. They pay the full opportunity cost of their time, the cab, and the gas, and everything, and depreciation of the cab, and so on. It's all paid for, but they're not making excess economic profits. Right? These are always economic costs, not accounting costs here. Does that make sense? All right. So upward sloping supply, you get if you don't have free entry and exits, or you issue taxi cab medallions, you have increasing costs, or you have heterogeneous capacity-constrained firms. We didn't go to number 5. Who wants to be number 5? Nobody? We're done. There's a really good soccer game on. Trust me. But I'm willing to answer questions. Yeah. Small q to me, this is just personal preference. Small q means firm output. Big Q means market output. Right? That way I differentiate whether I'm referring to what a single cab produces versus what all cabs produce jointly. If you want to use that notation, I'd be really happy because it makes it easier for me to tell what's going on. But if you don't, that's okay. Yeah.
For the long run, the lump sum tax, would that shift up? Because in the long run, average variable cost is average cost. So if you have a lump sum tax, would that shift up the average cost curve?
It would, right? I'm not going to ask you about it on the exam because I already did that 4 years ago, and that class still hates me. I still get hate mail for that exam. But essentially what happens, to answer your question, right, if I charge a lump sum tax, this is now your new average total cost right here. So firms would now, in the long run, produce where their minimum average costs are covered, and long run supply shifts up, right? It also generates individual firms that go from producing this output to producing that output, right? So you get individual firms that produce more, but since long run supply shifts up, if demand is downward sloping, your quantity shifts in. So you get fewer bigger firms. You understand why they hate me? Yeah, got it. I don't know who was first. Let's start here. In the short run. In the long run, so in science, the word always hardly ever appears, right? Because that's not the way science works. But generally speaking, if you have a lump sum tax in the long run, it would affect output. But in the short run, it doesn't. In the short run, it just affects your profits. Does that make sense? There's no lump sum tax question on the exam. If you had a question. Yes, I like that one. All right. So Max, Kyle came and gave this lecture, and then it said at the very end something about increasing cost industries, and that leads to upward sloping supply. And I didn't get that at all. Right? That's how I translate that question, and I agree. That's really hard, and every single year people struggle with this one. So all this means is think of an industry that uses most of the input of a certain factor. Save this one. Oh, I'm replacing existing files. That's not good. Blank PDF, landscape, create. Okay. So I'm not going to pretend to be cool and know what programming skills are valued by the market. 10 years ago, programming spiders was really valuable. Now, I guess if you know the language R, it's really useful. Did you have a quick clarifying question? Sorry? I'm not going to make you draw the picture for it, but I can definitely ask you why give me some reasons why long run supply is upward sloping, right? Or did I say the opposite? I don't want to go against my word again. I've already done that once. Unless you object now, forever hold your peace. All right? There we go. So I'm not going to make you draw this picture, but I'm going to show you why it's upward sloping, and it's one of the reasons why long run supply could be upward sloping. So think of a firm, okay? Free entry and exit. Identical firms, bless you, but increasing costs. And by increasing costs, what I do not mean is that the individual firm's marginal cost is increasing or average variable average total cost is increasing, but what I mean is that as industry output goes up, right, that industry consumes so much of a scarce input that the value of that input rises and the price of that input goes up. So think about, the first guy that figured out how to program a spider or a crawler, right, a thing that crawls the web for information. Nobody cared, right, until somebody figured out that you could come up with a search engine that, revolutionizes the way we look for information in the world. So this company starts, other companies use this technology, but there are only, a couple hundred people in the world that actually know how to program this stuff. So as market output of search services that are based on spiders goes up really, really rapidly, what do you think happened to the wages of people that knew how to program this stuff? I have a friend. He has a Ferrari 458 Italia. He's got the convertible and the coupe. All right, wages went through the roof. All right. So basically, what happens is as industry output goes up, because there's a scarce input, this could be a skill, or this could be aluminum, or coltan, or some rare earth type thing. But as the industry basically demands so much of an input, the price of that input goes up. So maybe for the first little while, long run supply looks something like this. But as you get to this point here, input price rises. Right. What this means for the individual firm's cost curve, it shifts up to something like this, where this is now marginal cost, and this is average variable cost, right? The cost curves shift up simply because the input prices, the wages of the spider programmers, or the price of coltan, or the price of aluminum has gone up. So at some point, the costs go up, and your long-run supply curve, makes a jump because your input prices go up. It's subtle, right? And it's the sort of cat chasing its own tail, where all firms producing more, all firms going after a scarce input, making the price of that thing rise, everybody having to pay more for that input, so everybody's cost curve shifts up, which shifts up the supply curve. This is the picture that goes with it. What I want you to know for the exam is that there are 3 reasons you could have a long-run supply curve, which is heterogeneous capacity constraint firms, or you limit the number of firms, or you have increasing costs, right? I'm not going to ask you to draw it, but I'm going to ask you to know that if market output drives up the cost or the price of an input, long-run supply goes up because it drives up each individual firm's cost curve. Blah, 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 blah. So what 3 things? I must have said that 40 times by now. Heterogeneous capacity constraint firms. Use that over Passover, right? I'm going to use it because it makes you sound smart, or Easter, or whatever you're next going to break bread with your family. But the point here is that's a good word. So heterogeneous capacity constraint firms, or you limit the number of firms in the market, or you have increasing cost firms. Increasing cost markets. There we go. Question? Yeah, they're not. They're just. The thing could rotate. The thing could shift up. The thing could tilt back. It just depends on what happens to your input costs. But the basic, most important point is that this point here is going to be below this point, right? Costs rise. They could shift to the right, they could shift to the left. It's not clear. It depends on what happens to your input costs, but they go up for sure. I don't know what number we're at, 6, 7? We have one more question here. You want to text me a question? No? Or tweet? I've discovered Twitter. Are we done? Really? Yeah, that's right. Correct. Is demand always flat for a competitive firm? Yes. Right? So a competitive firm faces the residual demand curve, which is just market price. So the competitive firm sets output equal to whatever market price is, and residual demand, which is the demand curve the individual competitive firm faces, is perfectly flat. Does that make sense? So it can sell as much as it wants at that price, and it won't change price. That's a good question, an important one. Yes? Linear total product curve. I can review it really quickly. So what the linear total product curve says is, if you, in the simplest case that I did it, right, it was a one-for-one relationship. So you double inputs, you exactly double outputs, right? So if I double inputs, I double output, my marginal product is constant. Here it would be 1, right? So 1 more unit of input gives you 1 more unit of output. So 1 more unit of labor gets you 1 more unit of output. So marginal product is 1. It doesn't have to have a slope of 1. It could have a slope of less than 1 or more than 1, and then the marginal product is greater or less, but it's constant, right? So it's the same number for the linear total product curve. It's also equal to average product. It's a really, really simplistic concept. The only reason I used it is because that's the one way I can go from a production function to a cost curve and actually show you that relationship. If I do that for a function with multiple inputs, it's more math than I want to do in this class. So there's no intuition hidden in the univariate total product curve. That's really that important, but it's a good question. All right, I will see you on Thursday, 11. Be ready. Or see me at 2, between 2 and 5 today.